Of course, if you know how the belly frog is, this is just your frog. It has a hook in it. It's very weedless. Typically, this bait is known for being used really heavy cover, fishing around grass mats. I think it's really underestimated, especially with just a normal frog, just that the cadence, that walk the dog action, putting that bait, that being that it's very weedless, you can put it in places you normally couldn't put a bait that has a walk the dog action. So even though it's noted for being fishing the bait in a heavy cover situation, I use it a lot in open water situation. I don't mean offshore open water situation, but I use a frog a lot around docks and just fishing what we call in this area wolf packs. Fish that are just cruising the bank. I'll use a frog because the action is a little bit more subtle than let's say like a gunfish or a walk or any type of a typical hard walking bait. It's a little bit more subtle, than make as near as much noise, and the profile is a lot smaller. And like I said, it allows you to skip it under docks, skip it, under overhangs on the banks. So it's a bait that it's really more versatile than I think people give it credit for. But the setup for it I use, depending on what I'm doing with my frog, depends on the rod setup that I'm going to use for that particular application. Now, when I'm fishing around docks or trying to place the bait in more specific areas, I'm probably going to use a lot shorter rod than I normally would, and I don't use one that's quite as stiff. Let me explain what I mean by that. I'm going to use a rod that's got a little bit of tip in it, because with a little bit of tip, that allows me to skip the bait, kind of slingshot the bait under a dock, under overhangs or whatever I want to do. So using a little bit shorter rod, I probably won't ever use anything longer than 7'2". For me, perfectly is a 7-foot rod, 7-foot flat, a medium heavy. To me, that's the perfect rod to fish an open water frog situation. I usually use 30-pound braid. This is a 30-pound braid and a 7-2 to 1 gear ratio rod. It's not really that important that I have a real fast reel. There's a lot of real fast reels at 8-2 to 1, and they're getting kind of where they really, you can take up a lot of line. But 7-2 to 1 is just fine. 6-3 to 1 is fine as well. Because typically I've got the fish, it's just me and the fish. You might have it under a dock, but our docks here where I live, they don't even have posts under them. So a 6-3 to 1 does just fine for me. As far as line, I'm always going to use braid with the frog. The way the hook's set up, I'll typically try to bend these hooks out a little bit to just, this weedless is not really a problem, just I need the bait to skip really well. So I'll usually bend the hooks out a little bit. It just increases my hookup ratio. But I'll use 30-pound braid. I've never had a problem. A lot of people say use 50, 60-pound braid. That's okay. If that works for you, that's fine. My reason for using 30-pound braid is a smaller diameter lets the line come off the reel a little bit faster, so I can skip a little bit farther. It's really important, especially when you're in clear water, to be able to stay back, because those fish, they sense your presence there. They feel, if they can feel that little frog coming through, they definitely know your 20-foot bass boat is coming up to that dock. So you need to be able to stay back, fairly far. You want to stay back as far as you can and make a good presentation. So I'll use 30-pound braid because I think that gives me, just lets me make a pretty good presentation with it. And as far as how I'm going to work the bait, what I found is just a steady cadence, just that walking it back. I don't care what the fish is doing. You see one right behind it, just keep working it. Just keep working it. Don't go faster. Don't go slower. Definitely don't stop it. If you stop it, let him get a good look at it. He'll almost always just nose up to the bait and turn away. So that would be my advice. Now that can always change from day to day, so you have to make sure you're staying in the moment and seeing what's working for you for that day. But what I found, in my experience, is just walking that cadence back and forth all the way back to the boat typically gets me the most bites. Now, as far as my setup, if I'm using it in a little bit more a heavier situation where we're fishing in grass mats, fishing in timber, something where the structure is a little bit thicker, and we use a lot bigger rod, I'm probably going to go to a 7'6", 7'10", a rod that's got some muster. I need a little bit more stopping power. If I'm making a long cast with the frog, I need to be able to get the fish coming back to the boat, and I need as much leverage as I can. I use a little bit longer rod. I will typically, If I have to, I'll step up to 50, 55-pound braid. I still like 30 because it gives me the distance. The smaller braid, it's really hard, especially on a long cast. It's going to be really hard for you to break 30-pound braid if you tie a good double Palomar knot. So I'll try to stick with the 30-pound braid if the situation allows me to. I like a heavy foot, a heavy action rod on that. Heavy foot, 7'6", 7'10", gives me some stopping power. I can turn the fish around, get him coming to the boat.